Yes, he put on his hat, therefore it's time to start. First of all, thank you all very, very much for coming. We really appreciate it. And as Reverend Libby is just getting in here now, I just want to embarrass him by thanking him for the use of his church and let him know that it is sincerely appreciated. Just a brief explanation as to what we're going to be doing today. We're going to take part of the Civil War ceremony, part of the Haston Library ceremonies. We'll meld them together, and hopefully we'll get you out of here in soon enough time to maybe start a cookout later this afternoon. As we always do when we start our proceedings, we start it with the chaplain and some comments. Frank Potter.
Uncover. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, today we remember and pay tribute to the men and women of our armed forces who have died in the defense of our nation from the days of the Revolution to these days in Iraq and Afghanistan. They paid the ultimate sacrifice to the freedoms we hold so dear. In the words of sacred scripture we hear, there is no greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for a friend. It is only by your grace and the love they have for you and this nation that they gave them the strength to lay down their lives. We beseech you, O Lord, to receive these servants of peace into your loving embrace and grant them the eternal peace that surpasses all understanding. We also remember the family members of these great heroes. They too suffer a great and painful sacrifice. Bestow upon them the blessings of your consolation and peace. May you ease their sadness as they continue on the road to serenity and hope. To you we offer the prayer, knowing you will fulfill the heart's desires of those who see you with noble intentions. May our prayers for truth and lasting peace be answered in accordance to your will and for the good of your sons and daughters. Grant this through our Lord Jesus Christ, the King of Peace. Amen.
Amen. And now we'll start with what would be the ceremony at the Civil War, and that is to commemorate, obviously, the Battle of Gettysburg, which in essence was the turning point of the Civil War, and it is the turning point as far as history is concerned of the freedoms that we express in the United States today, that all men are created equal. Along that line, Abraham Lincoln made the famous Gettysburg Address, and we'd like to have Caitlin Burnham come forward and read the Gettysburg Address. Caitlin is the president of the junior class at North Brookfield High.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who have gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause from which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not have perished from this earth.
Thank you very much. Very well done. Now we move down to the Haston Public Library. And at this time, we have speakers that we normally traditionally have. And our first speaker this morning is going to be the chair of the North Brookfield Board of Selectmen, Mary Walter.
Less. I just want you all to know that I speak for the board, a wonderful team. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge and thank those who made today's memorial events possible. James Foyle, Master of Ceremonies, Chad Charis, Commander, VFW Post 3439, Raymond Dupel, Commander, American Legion Post 41, Sawyer Matthew Kearns. Also to the many volunteers and participating groups whose contributions amplify the honor given to those we remember today as having made the ultimate sacrifice in the service of their country. We say thank you. To those who are with us here, who are the living story of the price that has been paid to preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in our great country, the United States of America, we say thank you. Reverend Paula Sage, Pastor, Christ Memorial Church, honorable members of the North Brookfield Board of Selectmen, families and friends of our devout patriots. It is an honor and privilege to speak today as we stand together in a fragile world, free people in a free nation. On behalf of the citizens of North Brookfield, we humbly and prayerfully fully remember those who sacrificed their lives for this freedom and honor those who bear the pain of their suffering or loss. Above all, we proclaim a heartfelt thank you for our freedom to all veterans, but in particular those who are here in our small town with us and among us each day. Most of us here have known freedom all of our lives, but without their service and our vigilance and patriotism, it is lost. We believe that freedom is a God-given right, and throughout our history as a country, there have been oppressors who have tried to snatch it from us and keep it from those who seek it. Today, faceless and ageless, our enemies without borders terrorize the free, murder and oppress those who resist, and infiltrate and corrupt the societies that threaten their cause to conquer the world. Whether we call it a revolution, a war, a campaign, a conflict, a battle, a talk, or a negotiation, there is sacrifice involved in the preservation and proliferation of the precious gift of our freedom. As those who have sacrificed for this cause pass from us year after year, let us not forget those who at this time and on this day throughout the world continue their mission to defend and spread freedom in parts of the world where it has never been known. It is in sharing freedom that we assure our freedom. On this special day, Memorial Day, may we always remember the sacrifice of those who died in defense of our freedom. And every day, may we remember to thank the veterans who live among us for their service in preserving it. At this moment, let us turn to the veterans in our midst, or look forward to those who are seated before us, and all together say, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you.
Very nicely done, Mary. Thank you very much. And now, as is the tradition, we rotate the churches, and this time we'll introduce Reverend Paula Sage, who is the pastor of Christ Memorial Church, and she will give us a few words also.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a privilege to be here. We're gathered here today to remember with honor and gratitude all those who have sacrificed their lives in wars on behalf of our country. Even though Memorial Day didn't begin until the time of the Civil War in 1866, and it didn't become a national holiday until even later than that, we still celebrate those who gave their lives in all the wars from the beginning when we go back and think about Memorial Day. Memorial Day was first called Decoration Day. It was called Decoration Day because the activity of the day was to lay flowers on the tombs of those who fell in battle in all the wars in our country. I can remember my mom calling it Decoration Day. I think in New England sometimes change is hard. And they changed the name of the holiday, and she never got used to it. Now, we maintain this tradition of decorating graves and of celebrating with flowers and flags to this day. And we're careful to remember those who have given their lives in all the wars that have been fought. Twice a year in this country, we have national holidays that honor those who have served and who serve in our armed forces. On Veterans Day in November, we honor all who have served their country. On Memorial Day, we honor especially those who gave their lives. Thankfully, many more people get to receive appreciation on Veterans Day than on Memorial Day. But the level of sacrifice, of course, is much greater for those we honor, especially on Memorial Day. Do you have any idea how many brave souls in the history of our country we are honoring on this Memorial Day? Do you have any idea of the number of Americans who have given their lives for their country, starting with the Revolutionary War, including all the wars in which the U.S. has been and is now engaged? The count is now well over 1 million. Well over 1 million. So just imagine field after field of simple white crosses set close together, stretching as far as you can see. Over 1 million is a number it's too hard almost to imagine how big that would be. Today, if you want to, you can imagine the sun shining down on them. Or imagine a field of flags as far as you can see, one for each brave soldier or sailor who left family and loved ones and joined together to fight so that we who are left behind can sit here today feeling secure and free at home. These men and women sacrificed their lives for ours. They faced danger for our safety. They fell so that we can walk freely. Together, we gather here to honor them. They deserve all our thanks and praise, for the sacrifices that they and their families have made. I like to think they're watching us today and can feel our gratitude reaching up to them. They are held now in the loving arms of God. But their families over the years have been left behind to deal with losses that are too big to describe. As we remember those today who went to serve and did not return, let us also remember with honor their families, the families who saw them off and were deprived of the joy of welcoming them home. May they all have the peace they so richly deserve as they receive our unfailing gratitude and appreciation. I too am from a military family. I grew up with these traditions being actively remembered and practiced. My brother's a retired Army colonel. I saw him last week. I told him that I was going to be here today doing this, and he kind of smiled. And I said, "So what would your message be, Colonel?" And we affectionately call him that. And he just looked at me and he thought a minute and he said, "I love my country. I loved my job. And I'm grateful to God that nobody is going to be reading my name anywhere on Memorial Day." Because he was one of the ones who was blessed to return. And he has that awareness. Your presence today, all of you, is a tribute to the men and women and their families, both those who have died in service and those who continue to serve and those who served in the past. I'm going to ask you to go one step further today. And remember also that several years ago, Congress passed a resolution declaring a national moment of remembrance at 3 p.m. on every Memorial Day. Now, you will be somewhere celebrating Memorial Day at 3 p.m. today. I'm asking you to stop whatever you're doing at 3 p.m. and observe a moment of thanks for those who have given their lives so you can be celebrating this afternoon. May God bless you and your families. May God bless all those who have served and are now serving in our military, and those who will serve in the future. And may God continue to bless our country.
Very nice words. I thought Mary's was hard to follow, but you did a good job. Thank you very much. At this time, Chad Charis asked me to intercede or to give him some time. Chad?
Thank you, Colonel. On behalf of Commander Dupel from the American Legion, I just wanted to thank John and Jemmy for his decades of tireless efforts to put this together, and also for the past 10 years, Jim, you have been in one capacity or another involved in coordinating Memorial Day festivities. And I ordered a plaque. I'm sorry to say that it did not arrive yet. So we were planning on presenting you a plaque for your... I still have to do this? Yes, yes. You know, people don't realize the amount of time and preparation that goes into putting this together. It's many, many meetings and many hours of deliberations. And I just wanted to mention that we have with us today the state president of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Auxiliary, and for the past year she has worked tirelessly, traveling all over the Commonwealth and the country, fighting for veterans' benefits and rights. Mrs. Ardith Hayden. And this is my 6th consecutive year as commander of the VFW in North Brookfield, and I'm taking a break, and I've been elected district commander, so I'll still be involved here in North Brookfield, but it has been an honor and a privilege to serve the veterans in this wonderful town. And just wanted to also let you know that our commander-elect, Roger Brown, is battling cancer and is not able to be here today. So please keep him in your prayers, as he's going to need that. And thank you very much.
The next section we get into, and I'm sure you're all very, very pleased because you'll be seated during this, is the reading of deceased veterans for the town of North Brookfield. And it's when I first started, say 10 years ago, we were a little over 300. Now we're well over 400 names. So it's a task that's I don't want to say it's an enjoyable task, but it's a task that you want to do to give respect to those people that have gone before us. So at this time, we will start the proceedings with the reading of the deceased veterans. And if I could have Frank Porter come forward, please, and we'll start with the World War I veterans.
Thank you, Jim. The following World War I veterans are as follows. Arthur Allaire, Ernest Barry, William Bottomley, Joseph Bouchard, George W. Brown, Charles Burns, Willie Coro, Thomas F. Cuddy, Francis J. Daniels, Frank Gendron, William Green, Theodore Hebor, Eddie Huback, John F. Lyons, George Jones, Daniel Kelly, Robert Kelly, William J. McCarthy, Albert J. Matthew, John McCoy, Frank Minns, Charles Norcross, Frank Pulowski, Stephen Papineau, Arthur J. Poulin, Albert H. Prouty, Robert J. Quigley, Francis C. Rooney, Alexander Seaman, Thomas Severance, Henry Tripp, and Joseph Tucker. That concludes the World War I.
Now we'll start with World War II readings, and also make a note here that we have Tegan Bissett, Riley Ireland, Caitlin Roy, and Abigail Gilborn as our Poppy Girls. We ask Holly Kolaski to come forward and start our World War II deceased veterans.
Lloyd Alexander, Charles Anderson, Frank Balkunas, Chester Baldiga, Edward Banks, Edward Baronsky, James Bartlett Sr., Francis Barnes, Stephen Barr, Edward Barry, William Benvenuti, Arthur Baudet, Ernest Baudet, Omer Baudet, Harry Bennett, Ernest Benoit, Ralph Blackmer, Clarence Blake, Everett Bliss, John Borelli, Andrew Brown, George Brown, Alfred Brunel, John Brunel, Adrian Brusso, Lawrence Brusso, Lorraine Brusso, Donald Bullard, Alexander Buddha, Lawrence Burke, John Bizik, Wallace Bizik, Joseph Bizik, Joseph Cardinale, Alfred Caplet, Guy B. Carew, Carl Carlson, Earl Carter, Gordon Kavanaugh, James Chaplin, Alfred Sharon, Roger J. Charpentier, Arthur Sharon, Harold Shanavert, George Chasey, Joseph Japoulas, George Clapp, Arthur Cloutier, Arthur Cluett, Francis Cole, Clinton Cone, Cornelius Connolly, Dennis Connolly, James Cook.
Our next reader, Tim Nason.
Same as you, right? All right. John Corbeil, Harry Kuchar, Eugene Corll, George Crawford, Edward Crevier, Henry Crevier, Joseph Crevier, Roy Crevier, William Crevier, Arthur Cummings, Linwood Cummings, Richard Cummings, Waldo Cummings, John Kuski, Albert Cuthbert, Walter Zaha, Alfred David, Raymond Dakota, Edgar Delude, Lawrence Delude, Daniel Docra, John Docra, Richard Drake, Raymond Ducasse, Roger J. Ducasse, Stanley Dudley, George Edward Sr., Leo J. Egan, William Emerson, Michael Vincent Egan, Roland Chartier, Stephen Fahara, Harry Feldman, Donald Fletcher, Joseph Fontaine, Homer Forbush Jr., Frank Ford, Louis Fountain, Samuel Fulham, Francis Fuller, Hervey Gadbois, James W. Gaffney, Albert Gaudette, Alfred Galt, Norman Giguere, Ralph Gerard, William Guzzi, Henry Grabert, Walter Grabert, Jacob Grace, J.C. Griffith Jr., Raymond Gustafson, Charles Hack, Walter Hack, Leonard Hall, John Hamilton, and John Hammond.
Our next reader, Carol Charis.
Robert Hardy, Josiah M. Hardy, Clara F. Hardy, John L. Harrington, Clifford Hart, Roy Harvinder, Henry E. Hatch, John Hazard, Manuel Hallway, Francis Howard, Mortimer J. Howard, Dwight E. Howland, James R. Heward, Harry A. Huckins Sr., Ralph W. Igo, John Irish, Fred Jones, George N. Jones, Chester Jujixi, Ferdinand Kazmarzik, Richard Kelly, William Kelly, Herbert W. Kennan, Walter King, Frank Kingsbury, John Kizel, Philip Klimiavich, Vincent Klimiavich, Rupert Knight, Charles Kokansky, Francis Kokansky, Joseph Kokansky, Albert Korzek, Thaddeus Kularski, Charles Kowalski, Harold Bombard, Ernest Lacasse, Edgar LaCroix, Raymond M. Lahaire, Matthew Lack, John C. Lannon, Stanley Largess, Frank Latwis, James F. Leonard, Clifford Ledger, Alan L. Lees, Frederick Leatham, Francis Lee, Robert Lemieux, Francis Lassard, Maurice Letourneau, Homer Lincoln Jr., Carl Littlefield, Harold Lloyd, Frank Linz, Joseph Lyons Jr., Thomas Lyons, William J. Mann, Stanley Mandela.
Our next page of World War II veterans will be read by Ken Winters.
Wilfred Martell, Walter Metasavage, Peter Metasavage, E. Arthur Maynard, Earl Mayo, George McCarthy, William T. McCarthy, George L. McGrail, Jr., Joseph McMahon, Benjamin Mellor, Raymond Molesky, Charles Minor, Isidore Minor, Norman Minor, Romeo Minor, Joseph R. Minor, Grover Mitchell, John H. Monahan, Robert Monahan, Amy G. Morin, Alfred P. Morrissey, Frederick P. Moulton, Harold A. Moulton, Jr., Eugene J. Musso, Henry Munns, Elmer Narrow, William Nelson, Jr., Wilbur Nickel, Irving Nichols, Jr., Bernice Nichol, Theodore Nichol, George Ostigi, Hervey J. Ostigi, Charles Pulowski, J. Walter Perrin, Henry Peridot, R. Norman Perrin, Raymond Plant, Arthur Pollier, Joseph Pollier, Omer Pollier, Ralph Perkins, Felix Posius, Albert J. Poulin, Charles Prescott, Gardrad Prothrow, Robert T. Quigley, Charles Quinn, Donald Racine, John B. Rapp, Andrew Resicue, Charles Roberts, Raymond H. Roberts, Anthony Rogasevich, Edward Rimaz, Henry Rondeau, John Rooney, Francis Sandman, John J. Sandman, William Sandman, Carlton Vernon Smith, Sr.
Our next reader for World War II, Mike Kolarski.
William Raymore, Duncan A. Rice, Jr., Andrew Sierra, George Scott, Sr., Kenneth Sheldon, Francis Short, George Silverstein, Joseph Sladewski, Stanley Clarence D. Smith, Francis Sokol, Stephen Sokol, Frank Spooner, Kenneth J. Sousa, Roland Stapleton, John Stackow, Norman Stackpole, George Sullivan, James L. Sullivan, Neil Sullivan, Charles Stamokis, Benjamin Skurko, Benjamin Tavares, John Tavares, Michael Siskovich, Lionel Tipo, Harry Thompson, Agnes Toomey, Charles Toomey, Richard Toomey, Philip Trask, John Trella, Morton Trigg Sr., Bernard Truel, Joseph Truel, Hugh K. Tyre, Charles Varney, Donald Vorse, Stanley Waitina, Walter Wayhill, Bradley Wheaton, Harmon Wheeler, Francis White, Walter Willey, Clyde Wilson, Ernest Wine, Alexander Wisniewski, Frederick Riddy, Lawrence Woods, George Rinn, Eugene Wyman, Robert T. Young, Leon Zabik, Rudolph Zabik, Michael Zerkrovich.
That concludes our World War II veterans, and now we'll start our Korean War veterans. Sally Fisk.
Okay to use this. Anthony Bartolo, Ronald Bowden, Albert J. Beauregard, Raymond A. Blake, Oliver Boycott, Robert G. Brown, Robert Bruce, Arthur J. Sharon Jr., Russell Clapp, Joseph Connolly, Jackie Kuhn, Frederick B. Corbett Jr., Owen Cuddy, William Curtis, Wilford H. Dilling, John Doros, Michael Dubrino, Paul Flamand, Paul Fortin, Kenneth B. Forsberg, William F. Fulham III, Donald Groden, William C. Grout Sr., Frederick Hamill, William Herard, Asa Heavey, Robert Heavey, Mormon E. Hickey, Robert Howe, Anthony Huback, Thomas Igo Jr., Robert Igo, Ellis Ingram Jr., Clifton Jones, Harold Jones, George Kendall, Harry Kennan, Richard E. Kennan Sr., Wallace B. Kennedy, Gerald LaChance, Robert O. Lane, John J. Lane, Roger Latown, Walter Lewis, Edwin Lids, Raymond Madrazo, Richard McComas, Francis Miner, Raymond Morrison, Arthur A. Morissette, Frank Murphy, Harris Myers, Reedy J. Nealer Jr., Anthony Nichol, George M. Oliveira, George O. Sullivan, John A. O'Toole, Ronald Papineau, Alan R. Parker Sr., Philip M. Rault, Edward Ringard, John Robertson, Lawrence Rutherford, Wayne Rutherford, Edward Snelling, George St. Cyr, Roy Strandberg, Robert Sullivan, Donat Tomasian, Krekor Tomasian, Donald A. Tebow Sr., Henry Tripp Jr., Thomas Vantry Sr., Robert Ventro, Norman A. Vigneault, Hubert C. Vincelette, James J. Warren Jr., Alfred Welch, Donald T. Williams, Patrick Ravine.
And now we have the Vietnam conflict and the Persian Gulf era veterans, read by Donnie Smith.
Richard Beauregard, James Buckmaster, James Bizik, Roger J. Charpentier Jr., William C. Dupel, Leo A. Gilbert Jr., Frank Hayden, Ronald Gray, Richard J. Grenier, John H. Hall, Archer Howard, Stephen H. Howe, Ronald R. Kabowski, Stephen Kearns, John C. Krukus, Douglas LaCroix, Roger Latwis, Hamilton Lincoln Jr., Randall T. Lyons, George C. Mann, Dale Murphy, William Nichol, Richard J. Parker, Charles A. Putnam, Frank J. Tebow, Stanley Robbins, Barry S. Sandman, Ronald R. Schofield, Ronald Stackow, Joseph Valancourt, Carl Wade, Glenn Brown, James Fulham, Richard P. McAvoy, Christopher Parker, and Daniel M. Smith.
And that concludes our reading of deceased veterans from North Brookfield. We apologize if there was anybody left out. There was obviously no intent. In fact, we always try to err on the side of including somebody rather than not including them. And if names were mispronounced, you know, we're not all Kellys and Joneses, so we appreciate that. And again, thank the Poppy Girls for the job that they did. Then I'd also like to thank, it took 8 of us to read those names with one drummer. Ms. Cummings, thank you very, very much. And now at this time, the weather has given us a break, so what we'd like to be able to do is have the firing squad render a salute, and then we'll have taps played after that. So the firing squad, if you please stand for this, please. You won't see them, you should hear them. Order, Holmes. Ready, 2. Please be seated. That just about completes our ceremonies. What I'd like to be able to do is to go over a thank you list. Because as Commander Cheris said, there are a number of people that get involved with this. And we start this back in March, just to make sure that we have things working right. To start with, I'd like to thank AAA Transportation that provides a bus for the veterans to go and to the various cemeteries and provide an honor guard and a firing squad and have a ceremony at both of our cemeteries in town. That's tremendously important. I'd like to thank Courtney Cummings over here, the coordinator of the band, that we were going to have the band this year. All right, so that was a good thing, and obviously the weather precluded us having the band, but next year, right? Next year, okay. Great job there. I'd like to thank the American Legion Women's Auxiliary for the job that they do in support of the American Legion and the VFW in combination, and the job that they do with the poppies and what they do throughout the year. I'd like to thank the commanders, the American Legion, Ray Duppel, VFW, Chad Cheris, and they both asked me to say something here. As we know, various organizations are hurting for people, and we would like to obviously continue this ceremony, through the years, but both organizations are hurting for membership. So we would like to get as many members as possible to join or become participating in this event. I think it's a very worthwhile event. I think it shows community pride and community unity. So whatever veterans are out there and you don't belong to either one of these organizations, join. I'd like to thank Chief Smith from the police department for the work that the police department did in providing a level of security for us today. Chief Gannon with the fire department, thank you very, very much for that. Also like to thank, we usually have these wreaths and everything set up at the library, and Ann Kidd and her staff do a phenomenal job in preparing that. Also like to thank the Decorate Our Town Committee for what they've done, putting out the flags, setting up the town so it looks good. And in particular, one of the folks that is no longer with, that is K. Julie McCarthy. Julie came to North Brookfield several years ago out of the Boston area, adopted this town, and fell in love with the town, did a tremendous amount of work for the town as far as being on the town decoration committee, as far as working on the Council on Aging. Excuse me, spent several years in the Council on Aging, worked with the Town Historical Commission and the town's renovate the townhouse, and Julie passed away this past year, and her efforts will be sorely missed. So, based on that, I apologize if I missed anybody. It was not intended. So we basically want to conclude our ceremonies this morning, and I'd like to conclude it with Emily Sampson leading us in the national anthem. And what does leading us mean? Everybody sings, okay? You'll all please stand up.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watch, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Ready? Shoot! Wonderful job. You did good. That concludes our ceremonies. In all sincerity, as a combat platoon leader in Vietnam, I saw young men, 18, 19, 20 years old, die on that battlefield that never had a chance to enjoy the freedoms that we have today. Enjoy your freedom. Thank you.